If a child's nervous about, let's say social pressures or bullying, what can a parent do to help get them feeling ready, feeling less nervous, being able to handle these situations?
Right. So I think that there's some practical things that you can do, and I want to try to be as practical as possible. I think that the first thing is, I want you to remember that the school is your advocate. We're part of your team. And I know oftentimes parents get nervous about reaching out to the school. And I want to just reassure you that as someone who's worked in the schools for 28 years, we want to hear from you and we want to partner with you. There's so much you know about your child's life that we don't know about. And so if your child is coming into school worried about social pressures, they're worried about being cool or fitting in, so give us a heads up. Let us know. And I'll get to the bullying more specifically in a moment, but it's important that you give us that heads up. We can, kind of do a little inkling to the teachers with your permission, of course, and get them involved in certain things. I just mentioned Yachad. Maybe getting involved in Yachad will be a huge boost to their self-esteem.
Right.
Some kids struggle in school, and school's not their source of self-esteem, and that's okay. But there are lots of things we do in school that can help them with that. So I think that's so important.
Welcome back to the Jews Next Door podcast, where each month we explore a different topic. And in this month, we are focusing on helping you, parents, get ready for school, helping your children get ready for school. And this time of year is full of, many questions and worries. And this episode, we are going to be tackling all of those questions and worries with Dr. Jonathan and Dr. Elisa Froelich. Dr. John Froelich was the school psychologist at Y&J for many years and now the clinical director of Achieve Behavioral Health, the division of Vicar Holland Muncie, and has his own private practice. And Dr. Elisa Froelich, who is the director of guidance at Yavraz Middle School, who I had the pleasure of working with for many years. And it is a pleasure to tackle this pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
So, going back to school brings a lot of emotions, right? It's really, there's excitement for the new school year. And there's, the excitement of seeing friends if you weren't with them over the summer. But there's also, at the same time, comes with a lot of hard emotions. And I remember many years of seeing you and dealing with all these different girls, boys coming into your office. And it comes with a lot of anxiety, a lot of nervousness. And, as psychologists yourselves, how did, I guess before we even get into, other people's children, how did you get your own children ready each year to go back to school?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that the real answer to the question is we kind of cheated. And I'll tell you how we cheated. First of all, I have Elisa raising the children, so that's number one. But I think we cheated based on, a Gemara. The Gemara in Baba Basra tells us about the origin of schools, the school system, the yeshiva system, so to speak. Rabbi Shua ben Gamla started the yeshiva system for orphans, children who had no parents.
Right.
And he wanted to open up, they should have a place to go. So schools historically were treated in lieu of parents, in place of parenting. And that's really how it should feel. That was the original emotion that children were supposed to feel when they were going into schools. So in our family, Elise and I both were working in schools. We both trusted in schools. Our associations were positive and happy about schools. And behaviorally, before schools would start, the children would come with us to set up the offices in our school buildings. They were in the buildings. They saw us interacting easily, friendly with principals and teachers. And they saw that kind of modeling. I think they just came to trust schools, and the schools were healthy, safe places, kind of like that original model where schools are an extension of the home. I think that made it easier for them.
That's beautiful.
And I think also, and Jonathan's being very humble, he raised the children too. But I think there are actually two practical things that we do in our house that I think really psych our kids up for school. I think the first one is, I know I don't want to take away from the PTAs. I know a lot of the PTAs sell the school supplies, but we Badafka don't do that. We actually take each of our children individually for school supply shopping. And I know it sounds like a silly thing. Even my high school kids, they get excited, like, what binder am I going to use? What's my plan? Should I use a planner? Should I use what color? And it really just gets them excited for school. I mean, obviously, if it works for you financially, we always give them an option of getting a new backpack. Again, I know it sounds like a silly thing, but it really is part of it's the honor of getting ready for school. It's part of what we do in our home. Another thing that we started doing, probably say about 10 years ago, was sometimes we do it in June. and sometimes we do it like 2 days before school starts, it depends on our schedule, is we kind of have like a celebration of the previous school year.
So nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's really nice. We go out to a restaurant usually, and we give each child a letter that we wrote before about what we're proud of what they accomplished that year. And it's very specific. And so it could be that a child struggled with math all year, but I'm proud of them that they worked hard and they persevered.
That was beautiful. I love that.
Right. So I think that if you haven't done it yet, you still have a few more days.
Right.
And you could really just celebrate their achievements, because oftentimes children are anxious about returning to school or worried about it because they think they failed last year. And because they're not focused on what they succeeded at. You might not have done so great in Chumash class, but you were really fabulous when it came to going to the Ol Yachad events in school, or in the OU office. But to really praise them for why you are so proud of them, that they should come to school feeling good.
I love it. I feel like in a way, like you were saying, like you could do it whenever you want. Doing it closer to the school year helps them like remind them, like, no, like it was okay. Like, so even if you didn't do it yet, like it's
It's a great idea.
You know, if a child's nervous about, let's say social pressures or bullying, what can a parent do to help get them feeling ready, feeling less nervous, being able to handle these situations?
Right. So I think that there's some practical things that you can do, and I want to try to be as practical as possible. I think that the first thing is, I want you to remember that the school is your advocate.
Right.
We're part of your team. And I know oftentimes parents get nervous about reaching out to the school. And I want to just reassure you that as someone who's worked in schools for 28 years, we want to hear from you and we want to partner with you. There's so much you know about your child's life that we don't know about. And so if your child is coming into school worried about social pressures, they're worried about being cool or fitting in. So give us a heads up. Let us know. And I'll get to the bullying more specifically in a moment, but it's important that you give us that heads up. We can, kind of do a little inkling to the teachers with your permission, of course, and get them involved in certain things. I just mentioned Yachad. Maybe getting involved in Yachad will be a huge boost to their self-esteem.
Right.
Some kids struggle in school, and school's not their source of self-esteem, and that's okay. But there are lots of things we do in school that can help them with that. So I think that's so important. In terms of the bullying specifically, I think that it's important also that you give us a heads up if there's something that we don't know about. There are lots of things that we can do in school, whether it's making sure that those two kids aren't set up as chavrusas together. Sometimes we can even make sure they're not in the same class. It happens. I know my husband's going to go into more details, some practical things you can do if there's no choice. But I want to just reiterate that we care about your child. School's not just about learning. School is about helping your child feel happy every day. And so it's so important that you give us a heads up. And we can do things behind the scenes with your permission. The most important thing, I think, which is so helpful to some kids, is the kids knowing that we know. So what does that mean? It means to say that you have a conversation with your child and you get permission from them to tell the school. And then once they give that permission, then they know that during the day, there's a safe go-to person they can go to who's not going to judge them. And to say it over and over and over again, whether we're a high school student or a first grader, we will not to do anything without your permission. They're very worried about retaliation. We're going to go talk to the kid, use their name. We're not going to do any of that. We're just going to sit and talk to them and make a plan so they feel like there is somewhere to go in the middle of the day.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. That's very important. Great stuff. Just to add on, so there's a lot of research about social support. It's really important our children feel supported socially in their environment. Research shows that there's two concepts. There's social support that you actually are getting, and there's the perception of social support.
What do you mean?
So a person might be getting a lot of support, but they're not processing it that way. They're not realizing how much people are really there for them. And maybe you're locked into a certain
I mean,
mind.
like you were saying, like someone doesn't know that they have that go-to person that they can go to.
Yeah, or even people are actually helping them, and they're just not focusing. You're focusing on the one part of the day that's not going well, or the one child who is bothering, or the one relationship they want to have that they don't have. But there's all the other relationships happening, and they're not focused on it. So the perception of social support sometimes needs to be just clarified for a child. Sometimes it needs to be created. Mm-hmm. Sometimes there's not enough support for a child. The child is falling through the cracks in his family or in school. Also, just helping the child understand they're not alone. Is research about if you have I forgot which university did the study, you take a box, a heavy box, and you put it in front of a person, you say, okay, I'd like you to carry this box up this hill. Take a guess, estimate how heavy is this box, and they'll guess whatever they're going to guess. Then you say to a different person, okay, I have this box, same box. You and I are going to carry this box together up the hill. Take a guess how heavy this box is. They'll guess a lower weight because they feel they're in a partnership. They feel they're having some support. So going to school, understanding you have support. Let's say things don't go well. That's the burden, right? It could be an academic burden. It could be a social burden. It could be there's a kid I haven't gone along with in a long time in class, maybe a bully, right? If I know I have support, the weight feels less.
Right.
So I think that's important. I think also understanding who's on your team, whether it's teachers, principals, or other children. Many times I've had children come into school to meet with their teachers. And sometimes I've had parents reach out
Before the school year. Oh, wow.
to kind of have that feeling of support and a smile before the rigor of the academics, let's say, before the game phase, so to speak.
Right. Create a relationship already so that there's a little more of a contact.
Yeah, exactly.
And
I think also, sorry, do you want to say something?
I was going to say that in general, if your child's anxious about school, that's just a great idea in general to just kind of have them see their classroom, the wing that they're going to be in, to get a sense of their day. And they just feel like, I know this place already.
Sometimes a child is having trouble socially. They haven't been successful, let's say, making friends. So what I've done sometimes is I've asked the parent to speak with a teacher or with a school psychologist or with the principal to say, hey, who in this class, who in this grade is on the same wavelength, let's say, as my child? Who has the same interest? I don't know. I'm a parent. I just know my children. But who are the people I don't know who would be good friend material for my child?
Maybe set up some play date before the school year. And
Exactly. And also to have the child not feel like they're such a loner.
Right. And we can also just facilitate things, especially for older students, middle school, high school. We can facilitate behind the scenes. Oh, we want a Tzedakah committee. Let's put all those kids together.
yeah, I remember I was doing that all that.
Exactly. So really that helps them socially as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is also, separately, sometimes children feel like they're being bullied and they react as if they are, but it's really not bullying. Sometimes children are just very sensitive. And
Can we maybe let's just put a clear definition. What is bullying then?
Well, generally speaking, the official definition is someone who is a higher rank than you are,
Sure.
Who's maliciously doing it on a constant basis. So if someone's doing it once, that's not bullying.
like
That's
tower
bullying.
down.
And
I
we
feel like that's like where kids will come home and they'll say, I'm being bullied. And just like, this was the first time. But they won't,
Right.
they'll feel like that's like, you mean, someone was not being nice to me. That's bullying. It's not like you're saying.
Exactly. We have to give space for other children to be themselves also.
Right.
So if someone doesn't say hello to people anymore, or someone's pushy, someone's more impulsive, and they're just being themselves, they're not intentionally targeting you. It's not about you. But when children, and that is certainly still uncomfortable, right? But if I believe it's about me, I feel much less comfortable. If I believe I'm being targeted, it's much less comfortable than just that child has got his own stuff. And it's really about him. It's not about me. There's something wrong with me, right? But if I start interpreting it's wrong, the things wrong with me, people have it out for me because of me, then it's very depressing. It's very overwhelming to go to school.
Right. I feel like a lot of what we're talking about so far, you were saying it was like about sometimes comes down to the child's perception. So I feel like a lot of that comes from a child's self-confidence. So are there tactics that you would say that a parent can use to help build up a child's self-confidence going into the school year? That way they are, not going to have their own perception or even if they, it's not about perception, but just that they'll be ready to handle anything.
Sure. So,
I'm just going to add that a piece is that some kids just struggle in school, and it is a hard place for them to find self-esteem. And I want to make that clear. Like, I don't want everyone to think that school's easy for everyone. It's the place where you feel. There are children who on the basketball court have huge self-esteem, but the moment they walk into the classroom, they don't, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And I don't want to blame the children, and I want them to understand school is hard, and for some kids, and if it's hard, it's going to be hard for you to feel self-esteem in those places. Yeah. So I think that the first piece is that number one is, and I guess it's related to our little strategy that we do in our own home, is just to remind them that the new year, it's a new year, it's fresh. Whatever happened last year is no one's holding it over their heads. They have an opportunity to prove themselves, to meet new teachers, and to start. So that's really an opportunity for change. Mm-hmm. So I think that's important to stress with the kids.
It's a good thing that the school year always starts in LO.
Exactly.
Right. A change or at the time.
Exactly. It's a perfect time of year. And oftentimes, I teach Navi also in the school, and oftentimes I connect what are we doing in LL with starting the school year in class, and it's very powerful. It is very powerful. Yeah. And that comes to the other piece of we want the kids to do a cheshbon hanefesh also before school starts, and I think that helps their self-esteem. And what do I mean by that? I want you are in charge of your own career, and obviously you're going to have this conversation differently with a first grader than you are with a ninth grader. Right. But to say, what didn't really work last year? What can we do differently this year? What do you need from me? What do you need from us to make this year better for you? Nice. So for example, this child might say, I constantly was losing my papers last year. I said, okay, so let's make a plan. For the older kids, I really want them to be involved in making a plan. What do you think? Do you want an accordion folder? Do you want a binder? I know, again, school supply seems like a silly thing, but it's really not.
Oh, it makes the child feel like they're set up for school.
Exactly. So whatever it is, I've had children say to me, listen, I really cannot sit next to this child in my class. We constantly talk. We're two good friends. So call the school. Ask the teachers if they can please not put those two kids together. Right. To make a practical plan is so important. And setting goals. Like, what are my goals for this year? What do I want it? Same way you do Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, you set your goals religiously. You set your goals, for the school year. And when our advisory curriculum, we talk about setting SMART goals. That goals have to be SMART. S stands for something, and M stands for something, etc. They all stand for something, but the R stands for realistic, and that's really important too. Is a goal can't be I want to be in the honors math class if you struggle in math. Right. So to really help your child figure out realistic goals.
For younger children, they probably need a little more scaffolding. Like, right.
Correct. So again, for little kids, if let's just say even a first grader, they were just having a really hard time when they used to come home. They would have some playtime and they were having a hard time sitting down to do their homework. So you have a conversation with your child before the school year starts, and to set up a system. Whereas when they're going to come back, to school, we're going to have an hour. I know it was really hard for you. What would help you? Do you think we should have a timer on the clock? Do you think that we should have, whatever the system is, right. And to really organize with them something that could help it be easier for them, that there should be a plan. And I think the plan is key, that will really help them feel more secure, feel like this year is going to be different, and I'm going to really make it better this year. So I think that's really important for kids as well. Yeah. And I mean, I think that and it's going to sound obvious, but if school is hard for them for whatever reason it is, I'm going to say it again. The schools, we're your friends, we're your team. Involve us. I'm going to say it over and over again because it's the truth. And I think it's so important also that to make a plan for your child, about their specific academic interventions as well. And that's going to help their self-esteem as well. So if the child felt like, I really struggled last year in my writing class. So connect with the school, figure out why, and make a plan to make it better this year. I think that's huge.
That's huge. Yeah, and on school partnership, our first episode in this series on getting children ready for school is all about the school parent partnership. And like you're saying, it's huge. So,
and just to add one more thing before my husband takes over, I think that it's important also, you mentioned the friendship piece. A large piece of why kids have low self-esteem is because of the social piece. Right. And to really ask them, like, who are you interested in becoming friends with? Who do you think you can be friends with? And to get real names. I know it sounds funny. And another piece, which, again, parents are hesitant to do, and especially for the younger kids, there's nothing wrong with reaching out to a parent that you're friendly with and telling them that your child's struggling socially. I know it's hard for people to do.
That being very hard.
It's really hard. And I'm more than happy as the guidance person in school to play that role, to say, with your permission, obviously, as a parent. But there are so many parents who are so eager to help. And to casually say, my son's struggling a little bit.
How does a parent get over like their own, I guess, social anxiety of, because like it makes them feel like, I don't want my child to be the negative. I don't want to be the negative. Like, how do they get over that themselves? Meaning not even talking about the children now, but like the parents.
Well, I think a piece of it has to be trust. You have to trust the person you're connecting with. Mm-hmm. And there's certain people that from the community, from the neighborhood, you do carpool, this is a trustworthy mom or dad. Yeah. If I tell them this information, they're not going to go around and tell my kid that I called, and they're going to do it in a subtle way. Yeah. So that's the first piece.
And maybe another piece, by the way, might not always be true, but these issues are much more normative than previously thought. Mm. So most probably your friend or wherever the school is suggesting you to reach out to, or your neighbor, between one of their children or their sister's children or whatever.
Have their experience.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sure. Good point.
Right. But again, the school, from my perspective, is always willing to play that role if that's something you're uncomfortable doing directly. Right. But to but I think people don't think of that. I think it's okay because people really want to help.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I don't think people would think about that. I think they would think like that would be the last thing they would ever do, but that might be the first thing they should be doing. Right? That could be their help.
Just a few thoughts. So running a clinic, there's been a number of paradigm shifts over the last 10 years, certainly 20 years, but even the past few years.
I'm sure with COVID, and I'm like, why?
COVID, sure, yeah. And one of that,
I'm sure we'll get to that.
yeah, we want to forget about COVID. But,
Yeah, it's that.
so one of the details you have to work out when you're running a clinic is there's something called an intake. When the family comes in to, for therapy, whether it's for themselves, an adult for him or herself, or for their child. So you have to do an assessment. And in Europe, there are certain requirements what has to be done in the assessment. So one of the changes that has been of more recent years, the questions you have to ask to create a thorough assessment of the person coming in for therapy. So one of the questions that's repeated in a certain number of different ways is strengths. What are your strengths? What are your child's strengths? What are your family's strengths? What are your community's strengths? And it's a paradigm shift because it used to be focused on your weaknesses, right? Why are you here? What's wrong, right? How badly are you feeling? We need a diagnosis. What's wrong with your emotions? What's wrong with, are you feeling anxious, depressed? All negatives, all weaknesses. And the shift is, sure, we have to understand that, right? But we can't really do treatment well without understanding your strengths. In my office, many times I'll ask, let's say a 10-year-old child walks in. I'll talk to him and I'll ask in the first session, I'll say, well, and what are you, I say, I don't know you. I just know you for, 10 minutes now. You know yourself for 10 years. You've been yourself for your whole life. So what are your strengths, right? If anyone should know, you should know it. What are they?
Yeah.
And many times children will say, I don't know. I'm good at drawing. That's something small. And that's really hard. So if I'm neely, like if I don't know my strengths, how am I expecting the people in my classroom to know which? How am I projecting myself, right? So the more as a parent you can help your children understand their strengths. And if you can't answer that question about your own children or a specific child, what are this specific child's strengths? Then there's a homework assignment for you. Work on developing some strengths or figure it out, right? There's a business term called the value proposition. What is my value proposition? I want to apply for this job. I want to be a businessman. I want to work in a company. Other ring today was that. So what is for each of my children, what is their value proposition in the social world? Schools are identifying in the academic world. Well, you're good in math, so you'll bring a lot to, let's say, the accounting table, right? But in the social world, what's your value proposition? So kids sometimes don't understand it. Sometimes they have value.
And they just don't even know.
And they don't know.
Right.
Well, they didn't have the opportunity to express it.
And they've never even been asked that question for, so they don't even know to think about it. It's like when you first asked them, they're like, wait, what? I don't even, I thought we were talking about my issue. Right?
So it's important. Yeah. And then again, not to reiterate too many times, if your child has a talent, tell the school about it because we could utilize that talent in school.
Right.
Okay, on the play, yeah. One thing I used to do, actually, before I worked in Y&J, I was director of Grants at Yeshiva Tanach Passaic. So I did a little program. The 8th graders would have a longer day than the 1st graders and 2nd graders. So sometimes there were some 8th graders who were amazing children, I'm sure, but now they're amazing adults. Class wasn't always, their best talent at that particular time.
Right.
So let's say the last hour of the day, some children appreciated having a little extra time outside the class. And there were always a handful of 1st or 2nd graders who had dismissal earlier in the day, who I would pair up with these really cool 8th graders. And they would go to the gym together. And the 8th graders, there was such a covered for the 1st or 2nd grader to feel. It's the 8th graders can have a one-on-one time with me, show me how to catch and throw and shoot the basketball, and give me compliments. I'm being complimented by the coolest kid, this 8th grader, this top, person in the school. And both in terms of, for me, it was helping to build up some skills for recess, but also just some self-esteem, seeing yourself, you're hearing and seeing yourself being treated a certain way, acting out that role. And then you could try to do it yourself. But it's important to act out, practice your social roles, develop talents and practice them.
Yeah, and well. Yeah. One of the things that I feel has a lot of anxiety sometimes for students, for children going to the school year is the school bus. A lot of things happen on the school bus, and I'm sure we all know that. So what can a parent do to help their child to feel a little more comfortable, especially because what we've been speaking about, a lot of the anxieties going into school year are those social anxieties, and the bus is the most social part probably a school day in a way.
Yeah.
You have you're in class most of the time in the school day. You have lunch and your recess and you have some breaks in the gym, but the bus is totally social. So it comes with, a lot. I remember when I was growing up, running on the bus, besides for the education that I got on a bus, there is so much, bullying and the older kids dynamic and the younger kids. There's so much going on there.
Right.
So what can a parent do?
Yeah. You're 100% right. The bus is a big challenge. When I used to work at school, parents would call me and say, such and such happened on the bus. I need you to stop it. And I would say, well, buses are tricky, right? Because if I told you we decided to save money, right? After lunch, the school was going to have an hour. We were combining all the classes in the grade into one room, no adults, just for an hour. And then the adult would come in, we'll split up after the hour. So, and we would do this every day, twice a day. So what would you say? And the answer is you would say, that's malpractice. That would be crazy. Right? So I say, you were doing that. Like, that's the way it is. It's pragmatics, right? But that's what is happening twice a day to your child. I can't make the bus safe. I can't command the children in the bus to always be polite and sit the entire time. And, we all need to have our bus stories when we're adults from our reflections when we were children. But, carpool, skateboards, bicycles.
Anything bus with a bus.
Nonetheless, children are going on buses, and it is a big challenge. So like everything else, you do need to have a plan. You can't expect the school to fix this. You can ask the school to discipline. It's really hard even for discipline because the school can interview 5 different children. What happened on the bus yesterday? 5 stories. You really just don't know. You could put video cameras on the bus. There are things to do, but it's really hard. I think kids need to be busy with a plan. You don't need to actually be social on the bus. You need to be social in your life. You need to have friends in life. You don't need to have friends on the bus. Sometimes the perspective has to be changed. You need to have a plan for the bus. The bus is not 10 hours a day. It feels like 10 hours a day,
Especially for that child it's a struggle for. It feels like it's the entire day.
Exactly. I talk to kids sometimes who are trouble in class and I say, when you're looking at that clock in front of the room and you're just praying for the dial to speed up faster, right? It feels like it's going forever and ever. The bus could feel like that if you were having trouble with it. You do need a plan. If you have a plan, you'll be more confident. The plan could just be have a certain book I'm reading on the bus. I go to the bus, sit down next to the window, and I just read until it's my step. I don't lift up my eyes from the book. It could be I don't like to encourage the use of electronics, but it could be electronics. It could be a book. It could be that there is another child that 2 of them have a similar issue and they're just going to sit together and do crossword puzzles or math or something, some activity. And if they could focus on an activity, they could focus away from whatever else is happening or whatever else they wish could happen. I wish it could be like that child. And you don't want your brain to be there during the bus.
I do think that while the school's not on the bus, it is our responsibility to make sure that the bus is a safe place for all children, not just physically. So there are ways to, again, going back to my behind the scenes parent phone call, to say something like, so Sarah's having a hard time on the bus. Is it possible that Javi could sit next to her? And just have us where they always sit together. I mean, a lot of schools do assign seats. So we could also, the school can intercede in that way to make sure a certain child who's bothering another child is not sitting there. Obviously, there should be discipline if a child's really bullying or hurting another child. So I think there are things to do. But again, the plan is the key. That the child should know that if I'm not safe or I'm not feeling comfortable, there's a plan to make it better the next time. And that's key.
Totally. I remember I recently saw one of my friend's kids and I was like, how's the school year going? And this was like last year. And they said, it's horrible. I said, why? They said, because the bus. I'm like, what do you mean? The bus is so long. It's the entire day. I'm on the bus all day. I'm like,
feels long.
I'm like, where are you going to school? Like, 45 minutes away. Like, I get it, it's long, but like it feels long. And especially, but with these types of plans, they can be very helpful. So, what would you say in terms of, a child is coming back from summer and let's say last year they were best friends. And I'm sure this has happened many, many times where during the summer, something happened. Now they're not only are they not friends, but they're on very bad terms. Or something happened to a child in camp where they really embarrassed themselves in front of everyone. And now they're super, super anxious to come back to school because they know that as soon as they walk back into those school doors, everyone's going to be reminding them of that horribly embarrassing thing that they did. What can we do? How can we do to help them out in those types of situations?
I know it doesn't make them feel better in the moment, but oftentimes I share with kids that people have very short memories. Most kids are pretty self-centered. I know they laugh at me whenever I said, they really don't care about you. They care more about themselves. So they're going to forget what happened. It might be uncomfortable for the first few days, but they're going to forget it because they're just going to move on with their lives because it doesn't really matter to them. And that, I mean, again, in the moment that might not, but I think the theme is similar is what's the plan? What's the plan if that girl looks at you at lunch with those eyes? What's your plan? And to make a plan of, I'm going to sit next to this other girl. I'm going to just traditionally speaking, the research shows that when children are being picked on or someone's making fun of them, if they act as if it doesn't bother them, the bully or the perpetrator or the person from camp will eventually stop because they're not getting the rise that they wanted. Right. So to really, again, it's really hard to do, but the solution might be excusing yourself to go to the bathroom so that they don't see that look on your face. Obviously, if it's continuing, that they need to involve an adult and to let us know. And that's where that safe adult in school, the safe adult at home is there for them. They know that person will be there for them.
Sure.
But I think that's key is they should realize that, it'll be over if you just, push through. I do think also that just identifying their safe friends is key. And so help people.
Why in that situation? Because then they can just say, I'll worry not about this.
Exactly. I don't need that one. I have 3 other friends that are my loyalists.
They're still going to be feeling.
I know, but I just
it feels like everyone, right? Like everyone like generalizes, right? As I said, I generalized everyone. Right. It feels like everyone's thinking about me, even if it's really just like 2 people or 1 person. So how do they get out of that mindset even?
Right. So I think that that the key, again, some of it is letting other people know about it, their friends, letting their friends know how they're feeling. And if you could help your child, let their friends know. Like the loyalists that we call it.
Like for the child to say, like, I feel like everyone's looking at me.
Correct. So their friends, exactly. To say, no, we got your back, So they kind of, and they can even say it more frankly to say, Julia in camp, she's really angry at me for something that happened in camp. And I see her looking at me and to say, we got you.
God. And is that something like a parent should say to a child? Like, go tell your good friends, like they'll have your back. Like say.
And sometimes, again, it's harder to do as a parent. I know in school all the time, let's say the girl who, Michelle, let's say it happened to Michelle in camp. And I can help Michelle tell her friends. I can bring them all into my office. If she's uncomfortable, it's so great to see you guys back from camp together. You look like you had such a great summer. How was it? Blah, blah, blah. And that's her opening to say, it wasn't so great. I had a little thing with Julia. And the girl's like, really? You didn't know? And that's kind of like to help her tell her friends.
That goes back to what you were saying before. If the parents let you know, and you'd be able to fold them all in and
Yeah, no, everything they said is great. I think just a couple extra things. A lot of this relates to our previous question about your value proposition, who you are, what you have to offer in the social world. It's important to have security in that. It really helps you have resilience in these kind of typical situations, which will happen from time to time and certainly will happen on a school level to a number of children, for sure it will happen.
Yeah.
So without skipping steps, sometimes in life you can't really skip steps. It's really important to build up your self-esteem and understanding of yourself. That being said, there are a couple other perspectives and tools perhaps. So one perspective children have to understand is you don't need everyone to be your friend. And you're going to have people who don't like you. It's a fact of childhood. It's a fact of adulthood, right? Not everyone's going to like you. There will be people who you don't understand why. They just don't like you. And it's something that is important to learn how to accept as a fact.
It's a good thing for parents to help children to be able to accept when they're younger. That way they learn that. They learn it early on.
A lot of social mistakes happen from children trying to get into relationships where the other party is not interested. And that's when you make your unforced errors. So, yeah. Another tool perhaps is something maybe sometimes helpful for this and also helpful for anytime there's like an unexplained absence, a child has been in the hospital or a child for mental health reasons, let's say was out of school for a couple of weeks or whatever reason they don't want to share that they've been out and they're trying to reintegrate into any scenario they try to reintegrate. So children often tell me, what are I going to say? I'm going to come to school. Everyone's going to look at me, whether it was some social faux pas I made or I've been absent. what am I going to say? And I'm going to say, listen, I say to them, like Lisa said, people are self-centered, especially children. So answer the question quickly and shift. So for example, if they say any comment about the summer, say, yeah, tricky summer. And meanwhile, what did you do this summer? Right? And before you know it, if you keep the focus on the other, that person will be onto his or her own story about their summer, and just give them a compliment to the basic social skills. Say, oh, that sounds amazing. You're so cool. Your family sounds, awesome. And then you're back in. It's past, because kids are focused on, what can you do for me now? If you're going to help me win the game at recess, then you're on my team, right? It doesn't matter so much what happened this summer. And if this summer you were great, but you dropped the ball every time at recess, so I still don't want you on my team, right?
It's a good point. Yeah.
So I think that's yeah.
Yeah, I remember I had a good friend who their sibling passed away, and then they're coming. It was when we were in college, so when they're coming back in the basement the first time right afterwards, he told me right before we were walking in, like I was walking in with him for the first time, and he says to me, he's like, I don't really feel comfortable going in right now. I think everyone's gonna look at me. And I said, for a second, they probably will, but then they're all just gonna go right back into their learning, because we're all in Seder. Everyone's gonna go back to the learning.
Right.
He's like, are you sure? I said, I'm sure. So we walked in. And it happened. For a second, everyone looked up. For like a second, it felt like the whole entire basement just like stopped. He went to his seat. He went to learn. And then we're back to learning. And he said to me afterwards, he's like, how'd you know? I said, kind of like what you're saying. Like, I felt like, and they're all, they're all in their own world. They're all like learning, and everyone's like, for that 1 second, catches their attention. We're going to keep going.
I think it's helpful also because we as adults, parents, not only the professionals who are working with the kids, we've been around the block.
Yeah.
So if you were around the block, quote unquote, you intuited what was going to really happen because you knew it was going to happen. And I think that's helpful to kids. Like they haven't been around the block. You've gone through this so many times. Sometimes it's helpful when I tell kids, I've had 200 students in the same situation as you, and they've all been fine. So I think it's just helpful for kids to know that it's okay.
Yeah, totally. So with all of these different things that we've been talking about, oftentimes a child his anxiety is building up so much that maybe sometimes they'll come to have like a total meltdown or tantrum, either like before school in the morning. I was the first day, which is like, trying to get everyone out of the house on the first day of school, like we're ready. And then this child is having a total meltdown. What does a parent do right then and there in that situation?
Okay, so that's certainly not what you signed up for in parenting, right?
It's not in our parenting course. Like, what do we do?
But at the same time, I think when I work on this question with people, I tell people to remember the beginning. The beginning of your parenting was when your child was a baby. And at some point, your child was crying in the crib. And you have this dilemma. I remember with our children, this dilemma, right? Do you let your child cry? Or do you have to pick them up? Are you going to commit yourself now on day 2 of being a parent to being up every night until your child is much older, keeping your child on your shoulder? Or are you going to let the child cry it out? There's different opinions about this, right? And the opinion about let your child cry it out is teach your child to self-soothe, right? Teach that skill. Mm-hmm. Now, skipping ahead, here we are, whatever you did or didn't do, either way, now here you are, your child's having a tantrum. There's the same reflex, right? The parent wants to turn off this feeling right away. It makes me uncomfortable as a parent that my child is in pain. You say, stop crying, what's going on? Why did they say that, right? Why are we so uncomfortable with our child's emotions? First, we have to do is give our child space to express and experience their feelings. Mm-hmm. Put your arm around your child and let them cry it out. You're showing you're there for them. You don't have to turn off the spigot. Let your child work through some of the feeling as well.
Mm-hmm. We need to, they call it like the bulldoze parent. We try to bulldoze any obstacles out of their child's way. So
but you can't have that shit. You can't have nothing to go wrong for you, right? Help your child experience it. Help your child explore it. It's helpful for children if you normalize their feeling also. You say, I know exactly what you're going through. Maybe not exactly, but when I was a child, I had a very similar situation. To humanize yourself as a parent, and your child says, oh, okay, my parent who I respect and love and seems to be successful and functional, right? Also had a similar situation. They also had a friend, also had a friend ignore them, right? It's okay. You can become an adult. You can become successful even though these kind of things happen. You could also feel upset now, but you could still be safe. And also, most important, two last pieces. One is empowerment. Once you've let your child experience the feeling, which I really think is really important, say, okay, now what can we do about this together, right? Let's make a plan. how about you and I tomorrow? I'm going to email the teacher now. You and I tomorrow, we'll sit with the teacher and talk this out, come up with a strategy. We'll make some kind of plan moving forward. So what is the next step? But you really don't want to go to the next step so fast while your child is still mourning and upset and charged up.
Like first you need to just validate their feelings. And then once they're a little more calm, okay, but empower them, like you're saying, to
there's things to do. There are things to do, right? And last piece on this is role playing, right? But children have not experienced life. That's one of the main differences between adults and children. A child can be very, very smart, but they haven't had the experience. They haven't said the words. They haven't encountered this before. So once the child's calmer, you can say, let's role play. Tomorrow, this child's going to walk into your class, give you that stare, say this comment. Whether you can say, let's practice. When I practice this with children, so when I role play, I always have the child in my office be the bully, and I'll be the victim, right? I'll be you who has suffered, and you be the powerful person.
That way, you show them the proper way to do it, or that way you're giving them the chance to be
both, exactly. They get to feel empowered in this situation. They're imagining the situation. They're emotionally connected to the situation right now, and now they're speaking powerful words, right? They're taking the powerful alpha role, and I'm going to take their position, but speaking words that they can see, Tata, that seems to make a lot of sense, right? And then we'll reverse it, right?
That's cool.
And just to add, I think that when we use the word tantrum, we don't expect that a senior in high school is going to have a tantrum. I mean, there are seniors in high school who still have tantrums, but a tantrum obviously looks different with a senior in high school than it does with a little child. And, when they're resisting going to school, they don't want to get out of bed in the morning, those sorts of things, which is not uncommon. And so really to look out for that as well. And I think it's important to, like I said, to make a plan, but also the most important thing is to get the child in the building. And what do I mean by that? We do this all the time in my school, and I'm sure many other schools do it as well. A parent reaches out, again, the theme, let the school know. And then I say to them, tell the child that if they're not ready to go to class, they can just hang out in my office. We just want to get them in the building. Right. So we don't want a situation where there's school refusal and they're just not coming, and whatever it is, we have children who are having a hard time getting into the building. So instead of davening temporarily, we'll let them go do davening with the early childhood, so that they can feel like they do have an important role in the school. So we can create, but again, whatever we can do to negotiate with them and navigate them, getting them into the building.
So I feel like everything we've been talking so far has really been how the parent can help the child. What about the parents helping the parent, meaning themselves? And during all these situations, it's, they have, like, we were just describing a little bit, but their own feelings and their own emotions. How can we help the parents in the situation?
Right. So I think the first thing that the parent needs to know is you are your child's cheerleader. That's your job. And so in front of you, you might be super anxious inside, go into the bathroom, scream on top of your lungs, and then come out and say, we could do this. They're feeling what you're feeling. They're modeling what you're doing. And most important is that when we talked about this, as long as they know there's someone advocating on their behalf, they can do it. So whatever you need to do, whether it's reaching out to the school guidance counselor, whether it's reaching out to a private practitioner for parenting help. We have lots of parents in my school whose children are not currently in therapy, but the parents are getting parenting support. And it's so important, again, that there needs to be some sort of evaluation, whether the child needs to be there as well. Many times the child should be there as well. But I think it's important if a parent is having a hard time with this, to get the support. Because again, if you're falling apart, clearly the child is going to fall apart. And so whatever the school can do to help you with this. And we have these conversations with parents all the time. Sometimes the parent is too nice and they don't want to be the heavy. And we're like, that's okay, we'll be the heavy. You let us be the heavy. Whatever role the parent wants us to play to get the child to do what needs to happen, and to allow the parent to remain calm and to remain that caring, loving parent who also has limits, we're willing to do. So I think that's the most important thing, is if you need the help, you need to, as a parent, you need to reach out to your child. You're the secure adult. So that's key. On the other hand, I think also, like my husband intimated before, it's okay to tell children when you're having a hard time as well. But you tell them, you don't act it. Right. So you're remaining calm, you're modeling for them. I'm also worried about your first day of school. We just moved from out of town. and it's brand new for all of us. And I understand why you're worried. I'm worried too.
Right.
But you're able to hold this together. And I think that's important.
And it's validating to them. It feels like, okay, I'm not like crazy.
Correct. So the validating is huge. Remaining calm at the same time.
Yeah, sure. There are two perspectives that I think are helpful and healthy for parents to have. One is based obliquely on the Gemara and Chul, and the other is a pasuk in Eicha. So the Gemara and Chul is talking about cows and shechita and all sorts of fun things like that. So the Gemara is talking about cows and how they look. Gemara says, the Gemara contrasts the animals to people. The Gemara says, Kashem sheparsa pneim shonos, and that people have, unlike cows, let's say people's faces are very different. Kafta sehen shonos, their minds are different. So you are a parent, you and your spouse are two people, but your children, they're going to be different. They're going to be different than you. They might happen to be the same. You might have one who is the same. You might have a few who are the same, but children have to be different, have different interests, different social skills, social quirks.
And you have something for the parent to realize that it's like that you might be nervous about it, like I might be nervous about it, but my child might be totally okay.
That's true too.
Was that the way you were commenting?
That's definitely true. That's for sure important. But sometimes people are anxious because I need my child to be a certain way. Mm. And your child is going to be whatever they're going to be. You have to have space for your child to become who they are going to become, which might not be the image you had for them. Right. They have their own das, they can have their own interrelationships. Sometimes parents are anxious because when I was a child, I had 75 friends and my child only has one. But that's okay because your child's not you, right? Or it's the other way around. We're here about a month after Tisha B'Av. So the pasuk in Eicha says, Tov LaGever Yisa Ol B'nu Rav. It's positive, it's healthy somehow for a person to carry the burden in their youth. It does build character. Now, no one's going to wish upon their own child to have a problem. But there is something to that. There is something to that when you're young, you catch some difficult situations, you struggle through them, you're struggling, but you learn to overcome it, and you learn through the process. That's how you grow up. It's totally good. It's good for a person to have some struggles.
Sure.
And parents are very uncomfortable. We think we have advanced, society a certain amount. We have these amazing schools, which we do, and everyone can be comfortable and happy. But there are going to be struggles, and don't be afraid. And don't be surprised if your child has some struggle. That's what parenting's about. Join with your child in the struggles. And that's how they grow up.
Right. And I think also the attitude of the parent is huge when it comes to this, because if they are more nervous than the child, it really does make the child more nervous. And so it's so important for the parent to be optimistic, to understand that it's going to be okay, and that their child can be different, and that's okay too. And I think that's huge for parents.
Like I say, when a baby is crying, if a parent gets anxious or worked up over it, then it's hard for the baby to soothe. But if the parent calms their own body, they're able to, the baby feels it. And also what you were just saying before, I once heard Dr. Norman Blumenthal say that the school of hard knocks closed down. Like people don't experience hard knocks anymore. They don't deal with struggles the same way anymore. And in that way, meaning people need to. And like you're saying, it's a good thing for people.
Actually, I think that people do experience hardships, but the mistake sometimes they make is they think it's only me. And really, I have to make my child not have that. And actually, it's really universal. That's the mistake people make.
Yeah, it's very true. Very true.
Yeah. And that just speaks to another piece, which I know a lot of educators have been speaking about, is that it used to be in the olden days when a teacher called home or emailed home about an issue that the child was having, the parents would be, let's work together, let's figure it out. And now the parents often are fighting back, and saying, I don't see it. It's not true. My child's not doing his homework because it's too hard. And again, I'm not saying that's not the case sometimes. I have children too, I know. But it's the parents are just trying to, kind of protect them in that little bubble and realize, and that's why that's happening too.
Yeah, 100%.
Just to extend a drop on what you were saying, which is all true and really important points. Many years ago, I read a pamphlet, which reminded me, I think it was called How to Love Your Child by Rav Avram Pollack. I think I'm saying it correctly. So he mentioned that years ago, there was a custom in Europe that if a child came home and the teacher, the Rebbe, had disciplined the child during that day in school, custom was that the parent would give a present to the child for a child to bring to the teacher and give the teacher tomorrow at school. Really? Thank you for taking an interest in helping raise my child. Why, if you try to the Rebbe's job, have a job, right? Like you're saying, it's not to fight the school. It's not that the school is the toughies and the parents. It's let's together figure out how are we raising your child. So if the teacher could turn the blind eye. Teachers are happy to, you know what? Don't learn anything, right? Go fight, be disrespectful, right? Doesn't help me. It's helping your child if I'm going to discipline your child because right now they're having trouble with, impulse control or self-respect or behavior or whatever it is. Right. So for your child to go to school next day with a present, say, this is from my parents. We want to thank you for helping me out yesterday. It's helping me by you, putting me back in my mascaras. So that's a lost art, but we can reclaim that art.
We said it. You heard it here. I can hear it. Reclaim that art. Incredible. I love that. I'm curious, maybe more so you, but I mean, you're seeing it probably in the Chief also. Have you seen an increase in anxiety like from COVID or once COVID happened or not necessarily?
I think I'm definitely seeing an increase in anxiety. I think mostly because of the topic we just discussed, is the lack of resiliency. Is that I think parents are coddling, weak parents are coddling more. COVID? I think that parents felt bad for the kids and they felt like the kids were suffering. So they felt that, especially, I know we're going to get to this topic technologically speaking. Yeah. I think they're both related. I really do. I think the two topics are related because I think the use of technology soared during COVID. And I think that really, I don't know.
You're saying, yeah, no, so I'm assuming you're saying then that technology also increased.
Correct. I think our children don't know how to self-soothe anymore without technology.
100%.
And so I think that's I was just having this conversation with someone. It used to be I used to take my kids to the pediatrician, and if a kid was upset, a parent would read a book to them, or they would talk to them. And now they literally hand them their phone. And it could be a 2-year-old. So I think that our children are not learning how to self-soothe, and I think that's all related to COVID. I think the technological reliance increased during COVID. To me, that's really the area that those two are connected. And I think that, I can speak for my own work in my own school. When I teach, I try not to have the iPads out. I'm really working hard on trying to help the kids learn how to not be dependent on technology. And so nowadays, when a child's upset, they take out their phone and they watch a YouTube video.
Yeah.
That's what they do, just to relax.
I've seen so many times in school and this was in high school, when students who, maybe weren't the most, let's say, cool or didn't have a friend to be speaking to, what do? They just take out their phone. It's so interesting. I noticed many times they weren't even doing anything on their phone. Mm-hmm. They wanted to make themselves, they look busy so others think they're busy, or they wanted to make themselves feel like they are being busy. Correct. It's crazy. That's like, the anxiety, that social anxiety is crazy. And like you said, they don't know how to self-soothe. They just go straight to the phone. Like they just pull it out and be like, okay, I'll make myself look like I'm busy right now. Crazy.
So I think that it was a combination of COVID and the rise in technological use. I think it's combined. I really do.
Yeah.
So I think that we need I think the first step is really telling, obviously for a first grader or a second grader, we as the parents are really more in control of their technology use and also more control of helping them, like my husband said, failing sometimes. The blessing of a B-, the blessing of a skin knee. We've read the books. They're wonderful. And the importance of failure, and that we as consciously as parents, we need to work harder on. But I think as the kids get older, we need to tell them these things very directly. And in school, we talk to our kids all the time. We tell them very directly, what is resilience? Why you guys are lacking it? And we show them and we give them examples and they give us examples. We talk about, what do you do when you're feeling anxious? Do you take out your phones? And we have these conversations with them. And I think what's so much more powerful is having the children lead on this. After we have the discussions with them, they realize, this is not great. Until if we're going to have a campaign in school or, no phones between 5 and 6, let the kids run that campaign, not us. Yeah. It has to come from the kids. And so I think that it's very important to have frank conversations with the kids about it. And then as parents, to resist their resistance when it comes to the limiting of the technology. And I think that, we all know it's like you take a kid for the shot, they cry when they get it, but it's better for them. Yeah. So it's hard. That's the hard part. But I think it is related. That is related to COVID. I really do. I think it's all related. And there is an element, and I could say, and I think that the kids who were in certain key grades during COVID also, where you learn important social skills, they are missing. There is some deficit.
Which grade?
So I would say that, I do feel like the kids who were first grade during COVID, the kids who I think were third grade during COVID, I think sixth grade during COVID, those are like key years. I think that they really did see an impact in terms of like inability to manage schoolwork, some social skills deficits.
Yeah, fine. Sure. Did you see any of that in like an Achieve or in your practice?
Yeah, so I think everything you said is 100% correct. As an anecdote, last week I was talking to a representative from the New York State Office of Mental Health. We were talking about, they're legit. We were talking about, one of the questions that came up was about COVID and things that clinics have seen differently due to COVID. So one of the items we talked about was on the regulation standpoint, there was a concept that there's a thing called telehealth. Can you have psychotherapy sessions over the phone, over the internet, and is that legal to bill for? So COVID created like a 10-year leap into the future, right? Mm-hmm. It wasn't really allowed before. And now they just pushed through regulations and now it's ubiquitous, right? Sure. I think there was this worldwide transformation of our relationship to technology and socialization, social interactions over technology, right? That wouldn't have happened without a pandemic. Sometimes this is for good. It's convenient ease of access to services over telehealth. That's great. But sometimes it's not so good. And particularly here, I would say the decrease in the age at which children are interacting over social media, over social platforms on the internet, right? Whether it's things you type or things you're saying or things are being reported, things you're putting out there, it's younger and younger and it's more and more ubiquitous. And thinking about questions you talked about beforehand, about being able to recover from a faux pas. So in the olden days,
there's no documentation.
Right. You said what you said. You did whatever embarrassing it was in camp, and it's in your memory. It's not your memory, and you went ahead in school. But now people could watch the clip.
Right. You have to hope that it was done on Snapchat. So
it disappeared. I know it took a screenshot at them.
I know I take a screenshot. Oh, because it's on Instagram. Like you're done.
Right. So, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that, and obviously the research indicates that since social media has become more popular with kids, the increase in anxiety is through the roof, especially with girls. There's the FOMO, there's comparing yourself to other people. It's constant.
Yeah. I mean, when the Instagram files came out, they said that it was on purpose. They were like trying to get that.
Yeah. So that's what I think. Right.
Yeah. Would you say that there's anything that we haven't discussed yet that is important for parents to know going into school?
I would say that a really important thing is, and I mentioned it in passing, was that school is hard for some kids. And that explains why they're anxious about returning. And so it's so important to identify what's hard for your child in school and target it and figure it out. Yeah. Whether it means hiring a tutor for them, whether it means speaking to the school and say, my child did okay all year. She got B's all year in the class, but it was so stressful for her all year. And not just to go back and say, well, let's just go through it all again in September. Because might be some real learning intervention, learning support that we could provide for that child that can make things better, modifications that we can do, accommodations that we could do, testing that we could do. I also want to add that oftentimes parents are so focused on getting their child into the honors class. And those of us who've gone through schools, it doesn't matter.
And you're hearing it from the schools.
It's more important that they should feel secure. Obviously, if they're under challenge, we want every child to be challenged and to develop and to learn. Sure. But if there's a choice between, every child, every parent has to really evaluate. If your child is going to get B- in the honors track and be a nervous wreck the whole year, then maybe it's not worth being in the honors track.
Yeah.
And maybe it's worth it for her to get A+ in the second tier and feel more secure. Again, I'm not saying that that's the way to go. Sometimes we have very lazy kids who should be in honors, and it's good for them to be pushed and challenged, whatever it is. But I just,
like you said, a parent has to know their child. Some children will do fine with that, and some children won't. And
right. Correct. And just to reiterate that the school's there to have that conversation with you. But really important that we identify what your child needs, and it's not only academically, it's also socially. Maybe it's the time to discuss taking your child for therapy if they are struggling socially and emotionally and things aren't getting better. just to send them through another school year without the tools that they need. Maybe someone can help them. So I think that's the piece that I think that we should really think about is, and it's not just about the attitude we have with our children. It's about sometimes they really need intervention, and now's the time to work on that.
Any point?
Yeah, I have two points which I really think are really important, of course, because I'm saying it, but we'll see. There's no audience here, so I don't know. One piece is something I hear a lot from children, which is just about parents being present, not physically, although that also, but just mentally, just being present at home. We have our devices and we have our work schedules and we have our involvement in activities. And because we have devices, work, seeps its way into home as well, and emails, even if it's not work, it's carpool and it's whatever else you have going on, TBO, that's for the audience, that's a genetic thing. When you're having dinner time, you need to be there and the device is off for parents.
Yeah.
Homework needs to be you and your children, in my case, my wife and the children, sit with them, be with them, be present with them. It's really important. Children are really upset and they don't know how to express it to their parents. They don't want to insult their parents. They know their parents are busy. They see their parents are stressed and they don't know how to express it and they don't want to hurt their feelings. But it is a big burden on children's shoulders that the parents seem to be elsewhere in their heads during the home time. That's an important point for everyone.
I saw a great quote today. It was, even when your mind is full, still be mindful.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's important. Yeah, that's great. And then I think just to wrap up this, connected with the school piece, I hope the story makes sense. When I was in 10th or 11th grade in high school, so one day, principal walked in and said, we're having a new child, a new student in the class, and he brought him in. So this child, I have now looked him up online. I hope he's doing well. His name was Rash. So, Rash, welcome to Brooklyn. Where are you from? What's going on? So Rash had just escaped from Iran on camelback, through the desert, when the Ayatollah Khomeini took over. And it was really uncomfortable for the Jews. And him and his family got on camels and escaped. And that's
Like legit on camel. Oh my gosh.
And then here he was in our class. Right, exactly. And I remember thinking, here we are, we're complaining about homework and, this teacher is a little strict or whatever it was. And Rash, while we were whatever experience we had last month in school, he was on the camel, in the desert with I don't know, maybe a shirt. I don't know what he had, right? And him and his friends survived, and made it to America. And here he is. So I would think about the relationship between this young man and myself, or my peers and him, that we had with school. What does school mean, right? So I would imagine, I didn't really ask him this question, but I imagined for us, we were so used to it. It was all taken for granted. And so we were able to be sarcastic and negative or whatever we wanted. We could over-focus on sensitive things that, the lunch in school is not as good as we would like it to be and be all upset about it, right? He probably had a much better, healthier perspective of, this is amazing. You have air-conditioned classrooms and you're professionally trained teachers and there's materials, there's books. Everyone's friendly. There's no anti-Semites in your yeshiva. You don't have to hire yarmulke, right? So what perspectives are our children having about school? What are we having as parents? You might have had a difficult year with a principal or a teacher last year. There might be things about your child's school you don't like. The schools are amazing, but things happen. But big picture, right? What do we have here? What are we appreciating? What are we modeling to our children? And how are we modeling and teaching our children to appreciate what we have? To kind of give them that flexibility to say, perspective, right? And we lose that perspective because, Baruch Hashem, for the most part, things are going well in society. For the most part, it depends how we look at bathrooms and running water and air conditioning, right? But not everyone has that. And to remember, there are people like a Rash who have other perspective.
Wow, that's crazy. And the crazy story. As we wrap up, any final message that you didn't want to share?
I think I could predict what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. Schools and parents are a team. We're a team. So we want to help you and we want to be there for you. And whatever you need, there are children. More important than a child's IQ is their EQ. So we want them to feel at home. We want them to feel comfortable. We want them to love coming to school every day. They're not going to remember a thing they learn if they don't love being in our building.
Gotcha.
And last for me is the concept of reflective appraisal. Your children's self-esteem is based on they look into their parents' eyes, and what they see in their parents' eyes is how they feel about themselves. If your child was thrown out of class for whatever misbehavior, they still need to look into your eyes tonight. They still need to see that you love them and you value them and treasure them. Mm-hmm. So that presence and responsibility as a parent, and you can still love your child and think they're amazing, even if they have some trouble in class, you have to keep that up.
Amazing. Thank you so much. You both have such incredible wisdom, so much experience, and this was really a pleasure. I learned and gained so much from this episode, and I know that's something.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of The Jews Next Door. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. I'd love to hear your takeaways. Reach out to us. Reach out to me at yair@genoff.org, hi@genoff.org. You can check us out on the website. You could leave a question there. We'd love to be in touch. Please be in touch. Check us out on Instagram at Parenting the Jews Next Door. Hit me up on Twitter at yairmenshel. And we're on TikTok now too. We have some great content, a lot of really great insights into parenting, tips, parenting pointers, reaction videos, and quotes. We have a lot going on. We have a lot of articles. You want to check it out. Check it out at genoff.org. You won't be sorry you did. And I look forward to hearing from you. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the podcast, make sure you subscribe and share it with your family and friends. Looking forward to another great episode next week.